You know, there's a silence that comes into a room not when there's nothing to say, but when you realize every word you've ever said has fallen into a well you didn't know was there. It's a silence that tastes like china dust and cold tea. It's the silence in which you finally hear the truth. Hello, my dears. Come and sit. It's Auntie May. Today, I want to talk to you about teacups. Not just any teacups. The ones we save for a future that's promised to us. The ones that hold more than just tea, they hold our waiting. And I want to tell you about the day I learned that the cup I'd been saving for a special occasion had been used by another woman for 20 years. The day I served tea on the china he gave her, and then I walked away. The ghost in the buffet. That is what it was for 30 years. A beautiful collection of shadows and memories held behind glass. My grandmother's Blue Willow china. It was not simply dishes. It was a promise she handed to me with her own thin-veined hands, a whisper of future joy she herself had not lived to see. She told me the story as I packed each piece in brittle yellowed newspaper, her voice a soft rhythm in the quiet of her sunroom. The two birds forever flying towards one another across the bridge, never quite meeting. A tale of longing, of love that endures beyond reason, beyond distance. She said, "Ellie, you save this for your special occasion. Don't you let it sit in the dark like I did." And I vowed I would not. I carried the boxes into my new home with Charles. A home that smelled of fresh paint and the wax he used on the hardwood floors. A home we were to build together. I placed the plates, the cups, the saucers, the serving bowl with the tiny hairline crack only I could see into the beautiful cabinet he had bought for the dining room. A cabinet with leaded glass doors that caught the afternoon light. It was perfect, I told him. He stood behind me, his hands on my shoulders, and he looked at the pattern through the glass. "It's very fine," he said. "Too fine for every day. We'll use it when the time is right." The time is right. What a phrase. It seems so solid, so assured. It feels like a plan. But it is not a plan. It is a postponement. It is a sentence without a period. And I who had vowed not to let it sit, began my long apprenticeship in waiting. I became a curator of the ghost. I would polish the glass doors each week. I would open them sometimes just to feel the cool smoothness of a plate's edge. To trace the blue river with my finger. I would imagine the sound the plates would make on our table. The gentle clink of celebration. Of family gathered. Of an anniversary, a promotion, a birthday worthy of such beauty. I would suggest it softly. "Charles, the first thought for your birthday dinner this year, we could use the Blue Willow." He would smile, that practical smile. "Oh Ellie, that's too much fuss. We'd be nervous the whole meal about chipping something. Let's just use the everyday." And the everyday was white stoneware. Thick and sturdy and utterly without a story. It was a plate that asked for nothing and promised less. I would nod. I would set the table with the white plates. And the ghost behind the glass would watch me. The ghost gathered years like dust. It witnessed our life. It saw the dinners eaten in silence over spreadsheets and newspaper headlines. It saw the Christmas mornings with just the two of us, the two quiet Easter Sundays. It saw the promotions he did get, the new car he bought, the golf clubs he treated himself to. The time was right for a new driver. The time was right for a vacation to a golf resort. But the time was never right for the china. The ghost saw my hope soften from a bright sharp thing to a dull persistent ache. It saw the moment I stopped asking. That was a different kind of silence. The silence of a hope retired. I didn't stop loving the china. I began to love it differently. As a relic. As a museum piece of a heart that was still capable of believing in a special occasion. My love for it became protective and sad. I would think, "Grandmother, I am sorry. I am letting it sit. But the world he and I have built is not a world for such delicate things. It is a world of the practical, the unbreakable, the emotionally washable. We live in the everyday." And then the ghost began to see other things. The small absences. The Saturday mornings he needed to run errands alone. The business trips that stretched a day longer than planned. The new habit of taking his phone into another room to answer it. I did not connect these things. Not then. To connect them would have been to acknowledge a draft in the house, a chill coming from a crack I could not see. I was too busy being the keeper of the quiet, the steward of the everyday. I was too busy tending the ghost in the buffet. It became my confidant, my silent witness. I would look at those two blue birds trapped in their eternal almost meeting, and I would feel a kinship. We were both waiting for a bridge that never quite appeared. What I understand now that I did not understand then is that a ghost is not passive. A ghost is an active haunting. By agreeing to let that china sit, to let that promise be deferred, I was haunting my own life. I was agreeing that my joy, my celebration, my grandmother's legacy was conditional. It required a permission slip from a man who was never going to sign it. Because the special occasion it represented was a love, a attention, a intentional cherished love that he was not capable of giving. Not to me. The ghost was not just the plates. The ghost was the woman I might have been if I had used the beautiful things. The woman who believed she was worthy of a Tuesday made special for no reason at all. I had locked that woman away in that cabinet too. I had put her behind glass and told her to wait for the right time. The Tuesday I finally took the cups out was not a decision born of courage. It was an erosion, a tiny rebellion of a spirit so worn down it had nothing left to lose but its habits. The sun hit the glass in a particular way. It made the blue pattern glow as if lit from within. And a thought so clear it was like a voice spoke in the room. Why not? Just why not? What are you saving it for? Who are you saving it for? The ghost is tired of being a ghost. It was not about his mother. It was not about a statement. It was about a bone-deep weariness with my own compliance. My hands trembled only slightly as I turned the small brass key in the cabinet lock. The click was loud in the quiet house. I had not opened it for anything but dusting in years. The air inside smelled faintly of old paper and stillness. I took out 2 cups, 2 saucers. Not the full set, just enough. I carried them to the kitchen and washed them, though they were not dirty. The water was warm on my hands. The china was shockingly thin and light. I could see the shadow of my fingers through the porcelain. It was so fragile, so terribly fragile, and I had left it in the dark for 30 years. When I placed the cup before Veronica and poured the tea, I was not serving her. I was serving the ghost. I was finally laying a place at the table for that hopeful young woman I had been. I was saying, here, this is for you. This is the special occasion. This Tuesday, this breath, this is it. And of course it was the ghost who answered. It was the ghost speaking through Veronica's smug, careless lips. Charles always said the handle fit his finger just right during those long writing retreats. The ghost used her voice to tell me the truth it had witnessed from behind the glass. It had seen him take the cup. It had seen him wrap it in a towel and place it in his bag. It had seen him walk out the door to his other life. The ghost was finally tired of my ignorance. It chose that moment to step out from behind the glass and speak. So you see, the ghost in the buffet was never my grandmother's china. The ghost was my own suspended life. My deferred joy, my waiting, and the moment I used the china was the moment I stopped being haunted. I brought the ghost out into the light, and in that light it transformed. It was no longer a wistful spirit of something that might be. It became evidence, solid, tangible, heartbreaking evidence of a love I had that was never meant for the shadows, and a man who had taken that love and given it to someone else in a sunlit lake house far away. The ghost became my witness. And a witness is not something you mourn. A witness is something you listen to. And when it tells you a truth that shatters your world, you do not scream at the ghost. You thank it. You thank it for its long and patient silence. And then you let it rest. Because its work is done. Your work is just beginning. The Tuesday truth arrived not with a storm but with the quiet click of a cup on a saucer. It was a day so ordinary it barely had a name. The same light through the same window, the same clock ticking toward the same hour. Veronica would arrive at 3. The kettle would whistle. The tray would be prepared. It was a ritual so deeply carved into the stone of my life that I could perform it in my sleep. And perhaps I had been sleeping. Perhaps for years I had been moving through these Tuesdays in a kind of polite and waking slumber. My hands knew their work. My smile knew its place. My conversation knew its boundaries. We spoke of the garden, of the neighbors, of the vague pains in her knees and the predictable failings of the new girl at her hairdresser. It was a script written in invisible ink. We performed it without thought. That day, however, there was a ripple in the fabric of my automation. A faint disquiet, a restlessness that had no source. It was not anger. It was not suspicion. It was a simple, profound fatigue. The fatigue of the white stoneware. The fatigue of the functional tray. The fatigue of a life measured out in identical Tuesdays with a woman who looked at me and saw a placeholder. I stood at the cabinet as I always did. I reached for the white cups as I always did. And my hand stopped. It simply refused. It hung in the air before the glass. My eyes were drawn not to the plain things I always used but to the left. To the blue. To the two birds forever in flight. A thought entered my mind clean and sharp as a shard. Why not? It was not a rebellion. It was a small private correction. An alignment of some internal compass that had been stuck for decades. Today I thought I will use the beautiful thing. Just once. Just for me. Even if she does not see its beauty. I will know. The key was in a small porcelain dish. It felt cold. The lock turned with a sound that seemed to echo in the silent house. As I opened the door, a scent escaped. Not dust exactly, but time. Sealed time. I took out 2 cups, 2 saucers. They were so light. They felt like holding breaths. I washed them. The water made them gleam. The pattern came alive under my fingertips, the blue lines, a river, a bridge, a promise. I dried each piece with a cloth so soft it was like caressing a child's cheek. I placed them on the silver tray. The one from our wedding. Even that felt like a reclamation. When Veronica arrived, she noticed immediately. Her eyes, those pale blue assessing eyes, went straight to the tray. Her eyebrows lifted a fraction. Well, she said. The Blue Willow. She said it like one might say the plague. With a distant clinical distaste. I simply nodded and poured the tea. The stream was a perfect amber arc into the delicate cup. She sat back in her usual chair, her spine not touching the upholstery. She took the cup. Her fingers looked wrong on it. Thick and possessive where mine felt reverent. She took a sip. A slow measuring sip. She looked at the pattern again, not with appreciation but with an odd familiarity. As if recognizing a face she did not expect to see in this particular room. It's thinner than I remember, she said finally. Charles always said it was too delicate for my taste. The sentence hung in the sunlit room. A bubble of ordinary cruelty. Charles always said, not we, not you, Charles. And the verb was always. A word that stretched back. A word that implied history, a shared knowledge from which I was excluded. It was a tiny hook. It caught in the fabric of my composure. Did he? I asked. My voice was calm. A pond without a ripple. It was the voice I had used for 30 years. It betrayed nothing. Oh yes, she said, taking another sip. Her eyes were on the birds now. Though he never minded the teacup. Said the handle fit his finger just right during those long writing retreats. Much nicer than those dreadful mugs at the lake house. There was a shift then. A fundamental rearrangement of the particles in the air. The words did not strike me. They unfolded inside me. They unfolded like a map of a country I had lived in but never seen. Long writing retreats. The lake house. Dreadful mugs. Each phrase a landmark on a landscape of lies. I saw his hand. His long fingers. I saw him packing his bag, the leather satchel he said his grandfather had given him. I saw him carefully wrapping something in a sweater. I thought it was a book. A special pen. It was the cup. It was this cup. He was packing my grandmother's ghost to share coffee with another woman in another house. A house with dreadful mugs. A house he knew well enough to criticize its china. The lake house. He had spoken of it. A friend's place, he said. Quiet. Good for thinking. He came back smelling of pine and solitude. He was always a little distant for a day or two, as if re-entering the atmosphere of our life was a struggle. I thought it was the creative process. I thought he was wrestling with words. He was wrestling with the transition from one reality to another. From her to me. And Veronica knew. She knew about the mugs. She had been there. Or he had told her. This was not a secret kept from his mother. This was a secret kept with his mother. She was the curator of this other life. The archivist. She held its details in her mind, the poor quality of the mugs, the fit of the teacup handle, while I lived in ignorance of the life's very existence. She sipped my tea from my grandmother's cup and judged the amenities of my husband's adultery. I did not move. I did not tremble. I felt a cold clarity wash through me like a chemical fixing a photograph. Every vague suspicion, every unexplained hour, every quiet withdrawal over 2 decades snapped into a grid of stark, undeniable truth. It was not an affair of passion I saw in that moment. It was a domestic arrangement. A parallel life with its own domestic complaints. The wrong kind of mugs. It was so ordinary, so banal. That was the true violence. He had not been stolen by a grand passion. He had been quietly building a second home. And he had taken a piece of my home, my history, to make it feel more like his. I found my voice. It came from a great distance. Sarah was at the lake house. I did not ask it. I stated it. I placed the name between us like another piece of china. Sarah, the childhood friend, the one with the understanding smile, the one who appreciated his mind, the ghost at every holiday, the absent standard against which I was always unconsciously measured. Veronica waved a hand, a flick of dismissal. Oh, don't be silly, Eleanor. She owns the lake house. Has for years. She lets Charles use it for his work. A kindness, really. He said you never liked the quiet. That you wouldn't understand the need for solitude. There it was, the final brushstroke. He had not just taken the china. He had taken my personality and rewritten it. I was the one who didn't like quiet. I was the one who wouldn't understand. He had used my very being as the excuse for his deception. He had made me the villain in the story of his secret life. The noisy, intrusive wife who forced him to seek solace elsewhere. And his mother, she believed this version. Or she chose to. She sipped and agreed. I looked at her. I really looked at her. This woman I had called family for 30 years. I saw the fine lines of satisfaction around her mouth. I saw the way she held the cup not as a precious thing but as evidence of her son's refinement even in deceit. She was not trying to hurt me. That was the chilling thing. She was simply stating the facts of her world, a world in which I was a minor character, a function. The fact that these facts would eviscerate me was not malice. It was indifference. It was truth so commonplace to her it was not worth softening. The Tuesday truth was this: the betrayal was not a hidden thing. It was a shared understanding among everyone but me. It was woven into the fabric of their lives. It was in the casual critique of lake house mugs. It was in the knowledge of how a teacup fit a finger. My life, my marriage had been the secret. The quiet house, the white stoneware, the patient waiting, that had been the illusion. The real life, the true partnership had been happening elsewhere with my china and his mother's blessing. I finished my tea. The liquid was tasteless. I placed the cup back on the saucer. The sound was final. A period. Thank you for coming, Veronica, I said. My voice was still that calm pond. She looked faintly surprised, as if the script had ended early. She set her cup down unfinished. You're not yourself today, Eleanor, she said. No, I thought. I am not. The woman I was an hour ago is gone. She was washed away in the Tuesday truth. What is left is someone colder, clearer, and utterly alone. And that aloneness did not feel like loneliness. It felt like sanctuary. It felt like stepping out of a play in which I had been saying the wrong lines for 30 years. The curtain had fallen not with a bang but with the gentle clink of a Blue Willow cup on a saucer. And I was finally silent because I had nothing left to say to any of them. The truth was out. It was sitting in the sunlight between us. And it required no commentary. It only required a response. And my response began in the deepest quiet I have ever known. The theft of sentiment. That is the wound that does not bleed but weeps inwardly forever. The betrayal of the body is a geography of pain you can chart, you can understand. It happens in a place at a time. But the theft of sentiment, that is a crime against time itself. It is a violation of history. It is the poisoning of a well you did not even know you were drinking from every single day. When I learned that he had taken my grandmother's china to that other house, I did not first think of their hands touching. I thought of my grandmother's hands. Her hands were small and capable. The skin was like parchment over fine bird bones. I can see them now washing these very plates at her farmhouse sink. The light from the window catching the soap bubbles, the careful way she would rinse each piece, holding it up to the light to be sure no film remained. She would dry them with a linen towel, humming a hymn under her breath. There was a ritual in it, a sacrament. She was not just cleaning dishes. She was caring for a story. The story of her own hope. And when she handed that story to me, she entrusted me with its safekeeping. Not the physical safekeeping of the porcelain but the spiritual safekeeping of the promise it held. The promise of a love that was deliberate and celebrated, a love that was worthy of fine things, a love that did not relegate beauty to the darkness. He knew that story. I told him. In the early days when we unpacked the boxes, I held a plate in my hands and I told him about the two birds. I told him about her voice, about her hope for me. He listened. He nodded. He said it was a lovely story. And then he said we should put them away for the right time. And I, in my trusting love, believed he meant to become part of that story. I believed he intended to help me write the next chapter. That we would fill these plates with food and these cups with drink, and we would create a new layer of memory over the old one. My grandmother's hope would blossom into our joy. That was the sentiment. That fragile, intricate bridge between her past and my future. His theft was not of an object. It was of that bridge. When he took the cup, wrapped it in a sweater, placed it in his bag, he was not stealing a piece of ceramic. He was taking my grandmother's hands and making them unwitting servants to his deceit. He was taking her hymn and humming it in a house of lies. He was taking the pure, hopeful love she had bequeathed to me, and he was dipping it into the murky waters of his double life. He contaminated the lineage. He made a relic of my inheritance into a prop in his affair. Sentiment is the glue that holds our personal history together. It is what makes a thing more than a thing. This chip in the vase is from the day our toddler tried to help. This faint stain on the book is from reading it at the beach. This worn spot on the blanket is from years of nightly comfort. We imbue objects with meaning, and in return they anchor us to ourselves. They are touchstones. They tell us who we are, where we come from, what we have loved. When someone steals that, when they misuse that, they are not just taking an object. They are attempting to rewrite your history. They are saying your meaning, your emotion, your sacred memory is fungible. It is transferable. It can be detached from you and applied to their narrative. For 20 years he applied my sentiment to his narrative. Every time he poured coffee into that cup in that lake house, he was not just having a drink. He was conjuring a false history. He was creating a shared secret with her over an object that held my most innocent love. I imagine them maybe in the morning. The lake mist outside. He hands her the cup. Our cup. She asks about the pattern. And what did he say? Did he tell her my grandmother's story? Did he claim it for his own family? Or did he dismiss it as just a set he liked? Either way, it was a betrayal. If he shared the story, he gave her my intimacy. If he dismissed it, he mocked my heart. Both are a form of theft. And the worst of it is the silent complicity he forced upon my memory. All those times I looked at the cabinet feeling that gentle ache of postponement, all those times I touched the plate and thought of her, I was in a relationship with a ghost. But he had turned that ghost into a co-conspirator. Without my knowing, my most tender thoughts, my most sacred connection to a woman I adored had been present in the room with him and his lover. My sentiment was the third party in their affair. A silent hostage. That is what makes the pain so disorienting. It is a pain that exists in two times at once. There is the present pain of discovery. And then there is the retroactive pain that floods backward, poisoning all the yesterdays. I must now look back at every quiet moment of missing my grandmother, every time I drew strength from that China's promise, and I must realize that at that very moment the promise was already broken. The vessel was already profaned. My private solace was a public joke in a life I knew nothing about. The past, which should be a place of refuge, becomes a minefield. Every memory now has a shadow. Did he pack the cup the day after I spoke of her so fondly? Did he drink from it on the anniversary of her death? The questions are endless and unanswerable, and they turn your own history against you. This theft also steals your ability to grieve cleanly. How do I mourn my grandmother's hope now? The object that symbolized it is tainted. Do I get rid of it? That feels like a second betrayal, to discard her gift because of his crime. Do I keep it? Then I must look at it and see not her hands but his. Not her hope but his deceit. He has inserted himself irrevocably into a line that had nothing to do with him. He has vandalized my emotional heritage. This is the particular cruelty of the sentimental thief. They understand that the value is not in the market price. The value is in the invisible threads that connect the object to your soul. And they seize those threads not because they want them but because they are there. Because your love for the thing makes it a potent symbol. In using my china, he was not declaring love for her. He was declaring a deeper, more intimate contempt for me. He was saying, I can take the very emblem of her heart and I can make it ordinary in my other life. I can walk out of her world where this is a treasure and into mine where it is just a cup. I can diminish what she holds sacred. And in doing so he forced a terrible choice upon me. To reclaim my sentiment I must sever it from the object. I must learn to separate my grandmother's love from the plates that carried it. I must find the sentiment not in the blue willow pattern but in the memory of her hands at the sink. Not in the ceramic but in the sound of her humming. The object can be tainted but the love itself cannot be. That is my work now. To perform a spiritual surgery. To extract the pure untainted sentiment from the stolen vessel. It is a lonely exhausting work. It means grieving the object itself. Letting go of the physical touchstone I thought I would always have. Because now when I hold the plate I do not feel one thing. I feel a collision. I feel my grandmother's pride and his carelessness. I feel her faith and his mockery. The sentiment is no longer pure. It is a battlefield, and so I must lay down the physical thing. I must internalize the memory so completely that I no longer need the plate to access it. He thought he was just using a cup. He was unaware of the universe he was violating. Or perhaps he was aware. Perhaps that was the point. To prove that nothing of mine was truly mine. Not my history, not my memories, not the love of those who came before me. Everything was available for his use. Everything could be co-opted into the narrative of his convenience. But here is the truth he did not understand. Sentiment is resilient. It is born in the heart, and while an object can carry it, the object is not the source. The source is within. He could take the cup. He could use it for 20 years. But he could not touch the love my grandmother had for me. He could not touch the girl I was who received that love. Those things remain inviolate. They are beyond his reach. The theft was real and it was cruel, but it was not complete. The core of the sentiment, the quiet flame of that inherited love, that still burns. He has forced me to protect it in a new way. To move it from the cabinet of my dining room to the vault of my spirit. And in that vault it is safer than it ever was behind glass. For no one can walk in and casually pack it in a bag. No one can use it for a Tuesday truth. It is mine alone now. Purified by this very fire. The economy of silence. This is something we women understand in our bones but seldom name. We trade in it. We use it as currency. We spend it to keep the peace, to smooth the edges, to make the world feel safe for others. For most of my life I gave my silence away freely. It was a cheap commodity. An endless resource. I thought I would be silent about my disappointment when he forgot an anniversary. I would swallow my words about his mother's cutting remarks. I would hold my tongue about the loneliness that grew in the room like a second shadow. I spent my silence like a woman with a bottomless purse, thinking it cost me nothing. I thought it was strength. I thought it was grace. I thought it was love. But silence is not nothing. Silence is a thing. A palpable living thing. It has weight and texture and value. And I had been bankrupting myself for decades. The Tuesday truth did not make me silent. It made me realize I had been a fool with my wealth. I had allowed him to become a millionaire in my quiet while I lived in the poverty of my own unspoken truths. So I stopped spending. I began to save. I began to invest my silence with fierce deliberate intent. The first thing you learn when you stop giving your silence away is how loud the world has been without it. His voice, which had been the steady background noise of my life, suddenly sounded different. It was not deeper or crueler. It was needier. It required a response. It was used to my silence as a form of agreement, as a sounding board that always echoed back approval or at least acceptance. When my silence withdrew, his words began to hang in the air unfinished. They would fall to the floor between us with a soft thud. He would say something about work, about the news, about the yard. And I would simply nod. Or not even nod. I would let the words exist in the space, and then I would turn back to my book or to the window. My silence was no longer an offering. It was a wall. A beautiful soundproof wall I was building around my inner self. He noticed, of course. "How are you, Ellie?" "Fine, Charles. Is something wrong?" "I'm listening." That became my refrain. "I'm listening." It was not an invitation. It was a statement of fact. I am listening to the space around your words. I am listening to the omissions. I am listening to the lifetime of noise that has covered up the truth. I am listening to my own heart for the first time. I am listening. And what I heard in that new quiet was deafening. I heard the machinery of our life. The empty clicks and whirs of routine. The scheduled kisses. The predictable conversations. The way we moved around each other like two planets in a stale orbit held by gravity but producing no light, no heat. I heard the ghost of my own voice, the one I had silenced years ago. It was timid at first. A whisper, then stronger. It asked questions. Why did you stay? What did you hope for? What are you afraid of? I did not answer these questions. I just let them live in the new quiet. I let them breathe. My economy shifted. I began to understand the value of a withheld word. A question not asked. A reassurance not given. Before I would fill his silences. If he was brooding, I would probe gently. If he was distant, I would bridge the gap with chatter. I thought it was my job to maintain the emotional atmosphere of the house. Now I let the atmosphere be whatever it was. If he was brooding, let him brood. If he was distant, let there be distance. I was no longer the emotional maintenance crew for a building I was about to vacate. This kind of silence is active. It is not passive. It is not the silence of defeat. It is the silence of observation. Of conservation. You are saving your energy, your spirit, your truth for yourself. You are no longer leaking it into the vast empty reservoir of a relationship that gives nothing back. Every unspoken word became a brick in my foundation. Every unmet demand for my emotional labor became a rest for my soul. I was growing stronger in the quiet. He was growing uneasy. He tried to fill it, of course. He talked more. He offered little stories from his day, details he normally wouldn't share. He brought home a pastry from the bakery I liked. These were tiny withdrawals he was attempting to make from an account I had closed. My silence was the notice on the door. This bank is no longer open for your business. He would offer words and they would meet my calm, collected silence, and they would evaporate. He could not get a purchase. He could not spark a fight. He could not elicit a smile. My silence was neutral, impenetrable. It was the quiet of a forest after the snow has fallen. It absorbs all sound. The power in this is extraordinary. When you stop explaining, you take your life out of the courtroom. You are no longer the defendant arguing your case. You are the judge, and you have heard all the evidence you need. Your silence is the verdict. It requires no announcement. It simply is. He would look at me across the dinner table and I could see the confusion in his eyes. Who are you? Where is the woman who soothes me? Where is the woman who fills in the blanks? She is gone. She is saving her breath for her own life. This economy taught me to distinguish between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is the aching absence of another's understanding. Solitude is the rich presence of your own. I had been lonely for 30 years in a house with another person. Now in my silence I was cultivating a profound solitude. I was getting to know myself again. The woman who liked certain books, who had opinions about the garden, who enjoyed the slow unfurling of dusk without commentary. This woman had been drowned out by the noise of my own accommodating chatter. In my strategic silence she could finally speak to me. And what she said was kind. It was firm. It was clear. The world misunderstands silent women. It thinks we are weak. We are empty. We have nothing to say. The truth is we have too much to say. And we have learned that most of it is too precious, too powerful to be wasted on the wrong ears. My silence was a filter. It kept my truths safe inside me where they could grow and solidify into conviction. It kept his trivialities out. His excuses, his justifications, his petty narratives. They could not reach me in my silence. They bounced off the surface. There were moments I ached to speak, to scream, to list the crimes, to wield the evidence like a weapon. But that would have been to spend my capital. That would have been to engage in his economy. The economy of drama and reaction and noise. I was building a new economy based on a different currency. Dignity, peace, self-possession. In this economy silence is the gold standard. Every time I wanted to cry why and sank that feeling into a deeper, quieter place, I was richer. Every time I wanted to demand an explanation and instead took a slow breath, I was investing in my future. He began to fear my silence. That was the turning point. When he realized my quiet was not a pitiful state but a powerful choice. My silence was no longer an absence he could fill with his own version of events. It was a presence he could not ignore. It was a mute witness that followed him through the house. He could feel its judgment not as a shouted accusation but as a steady, unwavering gaze. My silence said, I see you. I know you. And I am no longer participating in the story you are telling. In the end, my walking away was simply the physical manifestation of the silence I had already entered. I had left the conversation of our marriage months before I left the house. I had stopped contributing to the dialogue. The final words I said to him about the broken handle were not the start of my statement. They were the period, the last small withdrawal of speech before the permanent quiet. My silence was the real goodbye. It was the long, slow, dignified exit. The closing of the door was just a formality. So I say to you now, be careful with your silence. Do not give it away like pennies. Do not let it be the space where others write their stories about you. Hoard it, invest it, let it compound within you. Let it become the foundation of your next life. For in the economy of the soul, a well-managed silence is the sound of true wealth accumulating. It is the quiet rustle of your own spirit coming back to life. It is the most powerful sound in the world. The sound of you choosing yourself. One silent moment at a time. The unwinding. This is the quiet work. This is the part they never show in the movies. It is not a grand gesture or a slammed door. It is the meticulous, gentle, deliberate unraveling of a life that has been knitted together all wrong. You do not tear the sweater. You find the loose thread, the one that if pulled will make the whole thing come apart without a sound. And you pull, slowly, one stitch at a time. My loose thread was the Blue Willow plate. The Tuesday after the Tuesday truth, I stood in the kitchen in the morning light. The house was silent with his absence. I opened the cabinet. I took out one plate. One single plate. Not the set. Not for occasion. Just one. I warmed a slice of bread. I put it on the Blue Willow plate. I sat at the table alone. And I ate my breakfast. The china felt cool beneath my fingers. The bread was simple. The act was revolutionary. I was using the beautiful thing for no one but myself. I was feeding myself on the symbol of my waiting. With every bite I was consuming my own dignity. Taking it back into my body. I chewed slowly. I looked out at the garden. And I did not think of him at all. This was the first stitch undone. The unwinding is a reclamation of rituals. For 30 years our rituals had been built around his comfort, his schedule, his family. The Tuesday teas. The Sunday dinners with his mother when she was able. The Christmas Eves at his sister's. These were the patterns that bound the fabric of our shared life. I began to quietly withdraw the thread of my participation. I did not announce it. I simply altered the pattern. On Sunday I began to take a long bath in the late afternoon. When he would call out about dinner, I would answer from the tub, my voice echoing on the tiles. "I'm having a bath, dear. You'll have to see to yourself." He would pause. The silence on his end was confusion. This was not in the script. My bath became my ritual. The steam, the quiet, the closing of the door. It was a small fortress of time that belonged only to me. He ate cold cuts in the kitchen. I soaked in lavender and silence. I stopped tending to the invisible things. The things he never noticed until they were gone. The way his favorite shirt was always clean and on his side of the closet. The way the coffee was made exactly as he liked it by the time he came downstairs. The way I would remind him of his mother's birthday. I let these things go. Not with resentment but with a quiet release. Like setting down a heavy basket you've carried for miles. His shirt stayed in the laundry basket. He made his own coffee and it was never quite right. His mother's birthday passed without a card from us. He floundered. He would look at me as if waiting for a prompt. I would smile a small closed smile and return to my book. I was no longer the stage manager of his life. The sets were beginning to look shabby and he didn't know how to work the lights. The financial thread was a careful one. I did not empty accounts. I did not make sudden moves. I opened a new account at a different bank. A small thing. A seed. I began to divert tiny amounts. The money from selling some old books. A rebate check that came in my name. The $20 I saved by mending a coat instead of buying new. I fed the new account like a secret garden. It was not about the money. It was about sovereignty. It was about the psychic act of having a space in the world that he did not map, did not control, did not even know existed. That account was the first cell of my new life dividing in the dark. I began to remove my sentimental thread from the tapestry. Not the china. That was still too charged. But other things. The photograph of my parents I kept on my dressing table. The small jewelry box my sister gave me. The first edition novel from my college days. I would take one item at a time and place it in a cardboard box in the trunk of my car. Later I would drive it to a storage unit I had rented under my maiden name. The unit was small and clean. It smelled of dust and concrete. I would place the object inside and for a moment I would stand in the quiet of that blank space. It was the quiet of a future room. A room of my own. Each trip was a thread pulled. Each object rescued was a piece of my history reclaimed from the museum of our marriage. The most profound unwinding happened in my own mind. I stopped the internal narration that had kept me trapped. The story I told myself that he was just distant, that marriage was hard work, that his mother was difficult but family. I let that story fall apart. I replaced it with simple stark facts. He took my grandmother's cup to another woman's house for 20 years. His mother knew and approved. I repeated these facts to myself, not with drama but with the calm of a librarian cataloging. This is what is. This is what happened. Without the cushion of my old excuses, the structure of our life began to look like what it was. A facade. A beautiful empty facade. I stopped fearing his disapproval. This was perhaps the most liberating stitch to unravel. His taste, his opinions, his subtle corrections had been the wallpaper of my world. I changed the wallpaper. I bought a small painting at a flea market. It was not to his taste. It was bright and abstract. I hung it in the breakfast nook where I took my meals alone on the Blue Willow plate. He saw it. He frowned. "What's that?" "I like it," I said. And I said nothing more. I did not justify. I did not explain. I simply stated a fact about my own mind. I like it. The sentence hung in the air, a tiny banner of my independence. He never mentioned it again. The painting stayed. The unwinding is lonely work. But it is a clean loneliness. It is the loneliness of the sculptor who must chip away everything that is not the statue. You are removing everything that is not you. And you begin to see your own shape emerge from the stone of that shared life. It is startling. You had forgotten your own contours. You meet yourself in small ways. You realize you prefer tea in the afternoon, not coffee. You enjoy historical documentaries. You like to go to bed early with a book. These are not preferences he ever opposed. They were simply preferences he never noticed. And in not noticing he had caused them to wither. Now in the space left by the unwinding they began to bloom again. I did not pack a suitcase until the very end. The unwinding was not about preparing to leave. It was about ceasing to build. I stopped adding new threads to the fabric. I stopped making plans that included him. I stopped buying food I knew he liked. I stopped recording the shows he enjoyed. I stopped being the memory of our shared life. And as I stopped, the life itself began to atrophy. It grew quiet and still. The phone rang less. The calendar emptied. The house felt more like a place and less like a performance. The night before I left, I made myself a simple dinner. A piece of fish, some steamed vegetables. I placed it on the Blue Willow plate. I sat and I ate. I did not set a place for him. I did not listen for his car. I ate in a peace so profound it felt like a sound. A deep resonant hum. This is it. This is the meal. This is the occasion. It is not a celebration. It is an acknowledgement. A final communion with myself on the china that had witnessed it all. I washed the plate by hand. I dried it. I put it back in the cabinet alone. It was the last stitch. The unwinding was complete. There was nothing left to unravel. The fabric of our life lay in loose threads around me. They were just threads now. They held no shape. They could not constrain me. I could step out of them easily. And I did. The next morning I placed the broken handle in his pen box. I spoke my few words. I walked out. I did not look back at the house. I looked forward to the quiet. To the new work. The work of weaving. Of taking these threads, the strong ones that were always mine, and beginning the slow, patient work of making a new fabric. One that would be shaped only to my own form. A cloth of my own choosing. The unwinding was over. The weaving was about to begin. The gift of the broken piece. That is where the power truly lived. Not in what I kept but in what I gave back. I found the fragment in the grass on my one visit to the lake house. I did not go to confront. I did not go to see. I went to know. To stand on the ground of the truth. It was a cool morning. The house was empty. A green canoe was overturned on the dock. There were curtains in the windows. It was not a rustic cabin. It was a home. A cared-for home. And there on the edge of the wild grass where the lawn met the woods a small curve of blue and white lay half hidden. A piece of a saucer's rim. The distinctive willow branch pattern unmistakable. It had been outside long enough for the weather to have dulled its edge. It was not a fresh break. It was an old wound discarded. I bent and picked it up. It sat in the center of my palm. Cold and smooth. It was not a symbol of my pain. It was evidence of his carelessness. In the end, that is what broke me open and sealed me shut. Not the grand betrayal but the small carelessness. He had taken something precious, something that held the weight of a lineage, and he had broken it. And then he had stepped over it. Left it in the grass. The mower had probably hit it. He never thought to look for the pieces. He never thought to glue it back together. He never thought to tell me. He simply let it lie. That fragment in my hand was the perfect metaphor for his regard for my heart. A thing of beauty used for a purpose, broken in the process and then left to be weathered, forgotten. I closed my fist around it. The edge was not sharp. It was worn smooth by rain and time. It felt like a stone from a river. A stone you might carry in your pocket for luck. I put it in my coat pocket. It was mine, and yet I knew immediately I did not want it. To keep it would be to carry his carelessness with me. To enshrine the evidence of my own disregard. I would not let that chip of porcelain become my new relic. So I decided to give it back. Not as an accusation, not as a tearful plea. As a simple return of property. The box was his, a polished wooden box lined with velvet that held his fountain pen. A gift from his father. A symbol of legacy and thought. He prized it. He kept the pen in it always. I took the pen out. I laid it carefully on the desk. I placed the broken piece of china inside the velvet hollow. It fit perfectly. A different kind of instrument. An instrument of truth. I closed the lid. The click was soft and final. I did not plan a speech. I knew by then that words between us were currency that had been devalued to nothing. Words were how he lied. Words were how I pretended. We had exhausted language. The only thing left was the truth. And the truth does not require paragraphs. The truth can be the size of a broken piece of china in a box. When he asked for his pen, I knew the moment had arrived. The universe had delivered the cue. I brought him the box. I watched his face as he opened it. The expectation of familiar velvet, the shape of his pen. Then the confusion. The blankness. Then the slow dawning. The blue willow pattern was iconic. He recognized it instantly. His eyes flicked from the fragment to my face. I saw the calculations behind his eyes. Denial, explanation, minimization. They all flickered and died before they could become words. Because my face was not the face of a detective presenting evidence. It was the face of a curator returning an artifact to its rightful owner. Calm, neutral, done. This is the piece you used. You should have it. Those were the only words. They were not spoken in anger. They were spoken with the flat clarity of a transaction. I am giving you back what is yours. Your carelessness, your broken promise, the physical proof of your divided life. It belongs to you. I am no longer its keeper. I will not hold your guilt. I will not preserve the evidence of my own hurt. Here, take it. His reaction, the sputtering, the broken sentences, the plea for me to yell, was the most telling thing of all. He needed the explosion. He needed the storm. He needed me to be the hysterical woman, the angry wife, to make him the rational one, the persecuted one. He needed a fight, because a fight is an engagement. A fight is a relationship. My calm return of the fragment was a termination. It was the closing of a file. It was so quiet it was deafening. By giving him the broken piece I achieved several things. I reversed the theft. I took the sentimental object he had corrupted and I handed him back the corruption. I kept the love. I kept the memory of my grandmother's hands. I let go of the vessel that had been violated. I allowed the burden of the broken thing to reside with the one who broke it. For 30 years I had carried the burden of his emotional state, his comfort, his peace. Now I was giving him a small tangible piece of that burden to hold. It was a practice run. For the larger burdens to come, the silence, the empty house, the consequences. I also gave him a perfect symbol to remember me by. Not the whole woman, not the complex history of our years. A fragment, a broken piece. That is what I had been to him in the end. A thing that was useful until it was damaged and then left in the grass. And now I was reflecting that reality back to him with the precision of a mirror. This is what you made of me in your mind. Here it is. You keep it. There is a profound power in refusing to be the keeper of your own pain. We think we must hold it. We must carry it. We must nurse it and examine it and let it shape us. But what if you could simply hand it back? This hurt belongs to you. You created it. You own it. I do not. I am leaving it here with you. The broken piece was the physical manifestation of that choice. I was not leaving him with a screaming wife, a scene to describe to his friends, a story in which he was the victim. I was leaving him with a quiet mystery. A broken piece of china in a box. How does he explain that? What story does he tell about that? The fragment offered no narrative. It was just a thing. A thing that spoke of carelessness and loss. It would sit on his desk and ask him silent, unanswerable questions every day. My walking away after giving him the box was not a separate act. It was the second part of the same gesture. Giving him the fragment was the release. Walking away was the freedom. The gift made the walking away clean. It left no loose ends for my heart to cling to. I had offered him the truth in its smallest, most solid form. He could not engage with it. He could only sputter. And so there was nothing left for me to do. The conversation was over. It had ended not with a period of words but with the period of a physical object placed in his hand. I often wonder what he did with it. Did he throw it away? That would be a second carelessness. Did he keep it? Then he chose to live with a daily reminder of his loss. Either way, the burden was his. The freedom was mine. The gift of the broken piece was the ultimate act of detachment. I detached my heart from the object. I detached my future from his narrative. I detached my pain from its source and left it there on his desk. It taught me this final lesson: you do not heal by keeping the shards of what broke you. You heal by giving them back to the breaker. Your heart is not a museum for the artifacts of your own damage. You are not required to curate the evidence of how you were hurt. You can lay it down. You can hand it over. You can say, this is yours. I believe in the economy of the spirit. Some debts are not meant to be collected. They are meant to be cancelled. By giving him that piece, I canceled the debt. I wrote off the loss. I closed the account. The balance was zero. We were even. More than even. I was free. So I walked away lighter than I had arrived. My pockets were empty of fragments. My hands were clean. I had given back the last piece of him I was carrying. And what was left was just me. Whole, unbroken, and finally silent in a way that meant not the absence of sound but the presence of peace. The gift had been given. The transaction was complete. And I never looked back.